I was 25 the year my fate was sealed behind the cold stone walls of Lord Halwyn's manor. I had lived in his household since I was 15, first as a scullery maid, later as a chamber servant. I was careful, diligent, and, at least I thought, respected. But in those days, a servant's worth was measured less by her loyalty than by her silence. And silence was the one thing I could not keep. It began with words. A careless complaint in the servants' hall about the endless hours, the hunger in our bellies while the Lord's hounds ate better than we did. I never meant those words to reach beyond the kitchen fire. But words, once spoken, are like smoke. They find cracks, they drift upward, they reach ears you never intend. By the week's end, Lord Halwyn himself summoned me. He listened in silence while I stammered, trying to explain, but his eyes were already fixed with judgment. His sentence was swift, delivered without pause: 20 lashes. Behind the manor walls. The phrase was heavy with shame. Punishments in the square were meant for the townsfolk. But punishments behind the manor walls were different. They were not for spectacle, but for discipline, to make certain every servant remembered their place. That evening, as the sun lowered and shadows stretched across the courtyard, 2 guards came for me. Their hands were like iron as they marched me to the rear wall of the manor, where moss crept thick between the stones and ivy hung in tired strands. A wooden post had been driven into the earth there, stained dark by years of use. I had walked past it 100 times without a thought. Tonight, it was to be my world. The air was cool, sharp with the scent of rain that had fallen earlier. A few servants lingered at a distance, drawn by the promise of punishment though they dared not step closer. The steward stood nearby with a ledger, ready to mark the tally. And then came the executioner, broad-shouldered, faceless in his duty, a coiled whip dangling from his hand. They tore the back of my dress, leaving me in my shift, thin linen clinging to my skin. My wrists were pulled forward and bound to the post, the rope scratching raw against my flesh. My cheek pressed against the rough wood, splinters biting as I shifted to breathe. My knees trembled, though I fought to keep them steady. The executioner let the whip unfurl. Its length dragged over the stones like a serpent. He raised his arm, and for a breath the world stilled, no sound but my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. The first lash struck. Fire seared across my back, a line of agony so sharp it stole my breath. My mouth opened in a gasp but no sound came. The second followed quick, overlapping the first, and the third before I could draw a full breath again. My knees buckled, the rope the only thing holding me upright. By the 5th, I cried out. The sound was raw, torn from me without dignity. The servants shifted in the shadows, I could feel their eyes. I wanted to hide, to vanish into the stones, but there was no place to go. The whip sang again, and again, each strike a cruel reminder of my defiance. The executioner paced himself, deliberate. Between lashes the silence stretched, forcing me to stand in dread, to feel my heartbeat thudding against the wood. The whip cracked, leather biting through linen, each stroke blooming pain across my back and shoulders. 10, 12, 15, my voice grew hoarse, my cries breaking into sobs. By the 18th, my legs could no longer hold me. I sagged against the post, rope cutting deep into my wrists. But the whip did not falter. 19. My vision swam. 20. The final lash seared through me, and the world seemed to tilt into silence. The steward called out, 20. The executioner stepped back. The whip fell slack at his side. For a long moment, no one moved. Only the sound of my ragged breathing filled the courtyard. At last, the ropes were cut. I collapsed onto my knees, my hands falling useless at my sides. The stones were cold against my palms, wet with my own tears. The guards lifted me, not gently, and carried me back toward the servants' hall. Faces turned away as I passed, but I could feel their silence pressing close, heavier than words. That night, I lay on my stomach in the narrow cot, my back aflame with every movement. Sleep would not come. Each lash replayed in my mind, not as numbers but as moments branded into my flesh. Behind the manor walls, I had been made an example. But if Lord Halwyn thought the whip would silence me, he was wrong. For though my body bore his marks, my spirit remembered every cry, every servant's eyes watching. And in time, those memories would grow louder than fear. That was the lesson the whip could never teach: submission. It could break the skin, but not the will. And long after the wounds had scarred, I would still remember what it felt like to raise my voice and pay the price.